we are live on Friday, and hopefully we'll stay that way. Joe Chaffee and Joe Rayo on the Joe and Joe Weather Show on this Friday night after a couple of days in a row, Joe, of technical difficulties.
Oh yeah.
Last night was the funny thing was yesterday, in anticipation of of um, of something going wrong with the internet signal. I brought my phone down with me, and I brought it again today so that if it does suddenly I lose the internet, I'm just gonna hop on the hotspot, and then we should be fine. Well, yesterday not only did we lose the internet, but my entire computer just literally froze. So whatever ran through the system just pretty much shut everything down. And then as I'm rebooting the computer, Windows decides to do an update. So I had to sit here and so I had to sit here and wait. So my apologies to those our regulars or those who may have shown up for the first time. If you showed up for the first time yesterday, you kind of picked the wrong day to do it. So let's keep our fingers crossed that everything goes okay today. And just want to give a heads up to my subscription members on my weather platform on patreon.com/meteorologist Joe Chaffee. Make sure you read the post today because on Monday for members, I'm going to be doing a members only meeting after the Joe and Joe show is over. So I think I have it set for 9 o'clock on Monday. So come for this our live stream, and then take a half-hour break to do whatever it is you need to do, comb your hair, go to the little boys' room or the little girls' room, and then join the members only live stream on the Patreon platform. So that's going to be a new thing, Joe. I'm going to be doing it once a week on Monday nights at 9 o'clock Eastern time.
Sounds good.
Yes. So in the meantime, the chatter has gotten a little louder with respect to what may or may not happen. Honestly, I have very mixed feelings about this going forward because we're a good week early. We're a good week away from a point where we will still be unsure. I guess that's the best way to put it. So I'm trying not to really spend a whole lot of energy on this because it's just too far out and too many variables. But we're talking about the fact that models continue to rev up a tropical system in the Western Caribbean, and we seem to be keep going back and forth from run to run about whether it comes up the East Coast or doesn't come up the East Coast or goes out to sea, or as on the new GFS, it goes over Florida about halfway and then turns straight west and crosses the Gulf of Mexico. So that's why I'm just trying to sort of keep this kind of in, keep it in line here.
It's now how close are we? We're talking about something on the 27th or 28th.
We're talking about something that will probably start be in the period, say, late next weekend or early the following week. So
we're talking about something that's like a good 12 days away still.
Well, certainly at least 9 days away, if not 10. So yeah, that's 9 or 10 days away. Yes.
And we might as well throw the 18Z in the garbage because that's the one run that out of all of them that came up with this new idea, as you just mentioned, of going over Florida and then turning to the left or into the Gulf of Mexico.
And we'll look at it close. The one thing I did look at, Joe, was I looked at back at the 12Z on operational GFS run, and it matched up actually very well with the European run in terms of the basics. The specifics are off, but they're going to be different anyway. But in terms of the basic idea, they were really matched up fairly well. But what was surprising to me was that the 12Z ensemble matched up really, really well with the operational. So it seems to me that the 18Z run with what it did with the whole upper air is completely different from what the other one was, and it doesn't really match up with how the ensembles have been handling this over the last several days. So, like you said, it may just be. I know in the wintertime, I know in the wintertime we go through this a lot where we have storms that show up, and then all of a sudden there'll be a couple of odd runs will show up that'll do something really totally whacked out, and then it ultimately goes back to what it's been showing the vast majority of the time all along. So we'll see. In the meantime, it's raining here. I had a few heavy downpours. I think it rained heavier out by you and down in Jersey than it has over by me. Now the stuff is shifting eastward, so it really depends on what happens on the radar in terms of what I get overnight.
I have not looked at the rain gauge. Here's the annoying thing here is that, as you know, during the two heaviest bouts of rain that we saw over the summertime, my rain gauge flat out refused to indicate a single raindrop, and took the thing down off the mast, looked at it, cleaned it, put it back up, and we finally determined that it was the tipping spoon inside of the weather station that was no longer functioning properly. So we decided we'd order a whole brand new weather station, which came in the mail about 5 or 6 weeks ago. It's still in the box. And you say, well, why is it still in the box? Because as soon as it arrived here, the new weather station, what happened to the old weather
It
station?
started
It
working
starts
again.
it starts working again. And every day I look outside, I see, oh, look, it's raining
Well,
really hard.
why not run both? I mean, this is an opportunity for you to not only see which station performs better, but you could put it on a different spot, a different side of the house, and see if the rain amounts on one side of the house are equal to the rain amounts on the other.
Well, you see, the thing is that it's two parts. There's the actual physical instrumentation that goes outside, and then you've got the dashboard, if you will, that gives you all the details coming from that station. Now, if I hook the other one up, the problem would be that I'd have to determine which one is going to be visible on the dashboard. See, I can only look at one thing at
One
a
at a time.
time or whatever.
All right. Well,
Um,
I mean, these are first world problems.
yeah.
They're not second or these are
Anyway,
definitely first world problems.
I mean, as of midday today, we already had 7/10 of an inch, 0.70. I have not looked at it since, um, because it's just annoying to me, but I'm sure we've gotten even more than that. So we've had our fair share of rain today so far with this little system rippling along this front up along the Atlantic seaboard, and hopefully it'll be out of here in time to salvage a good part of the upcoming weekend. Although the weekend looks to be a lot cooler than what we had here just a day or two ago.
It's going to be downright chilly in some spots. Saturday night into Sunday morning. Uh, let's let's start tonight. I think we'll start tonight, Joe, with the watches and warnings map because this is the uh, first time since early September when we had the Colorado snowstorm that we actually have winter weather advisories up for somewhere, and that somewhere is up in parts of Montana and also along the northern counties of North Dakota and northern Minnesota. So, first little bit of accumulating snow for that region. Lots of frost and frost advisories and freeze warnings that are up for areas fairly far to the south, down into northern Alabama, northeast Mississippi, western North Carolina, right to the Georgia state line, and in the mountain areas, we're looking at some freeze warnings, and also up into West Virginia and Ohio, getting covered by a large number of freeze warnings. Otherwise, other than that, we don't really have any flash flood watches up for the rain that's going to be happening in New England on the order of a couple of inches. And by the way, I looked at the drought monitor. I'll bring it up really quick here. Hang on one second. The new drought monitor map is out. And just to show you that how severe this drought is in parts of the Northeast, particularly in southeastern New England. This is valid through October 13th, which was Tuesday. So we had actually two widespread rains baked into this, and the extreme drought is still showing up in southeastern New England and also up in southern New Hampshire, southeastern Maine, it's eased a little bit. The abnormally dry and the moderate drought areas have kind of eased just a bit, but it's going to take a lot more rain. Certainly, this rain tonight might help it along, but it's going to take. It's probably going to take. I would say at least three more systems like the ones we've had that have produced a couple of inches of rain in order to really have an impact here and bring the drought intensity down a bit.
It is kind of amazing. At one point during the late summer or early fall, or maybe about a month or so ago, I think I brought up the fact that one particular spot in lower New York had more than its ample share of rain, and meanwhile, Rhode Island and portions of southeastern Massachusetts, as you see right now on that map, were into extreme drought. So it's kind of amazing to see, the changes that happen over a relatively short area. It just goes to show you the kind of summer that we had. We had a very wet July and August locally
Right.
here in our area, but maybe not necessarily so for portions of coastal New England, which is why they're suffering through that drought as of this moment in time.
And of course, I mentioned all the time about the fact that there's a boilerplate over me, and I'm in central Long Island, and I'm just on the edge of that yellow where it says abnormally dry. But I think the rains of the last couple of weeks have made up for that. So now it's, of course, to get this weather system out of the way. We have a stalled front right along the coast. There's a wave developing on that front along the Virginia coast, and that's moving northeastward. So we're getting some rain. System does, it's got that north south almost rectangular box look to it. So we haven't seen this low really get going yet. It's going to develop in a bigger way. You're starting to see some clouds blow up east of the Carolinas, some thunderstorms there. So this low is going to deepen as it moves northward. It'll do two things. It'll pull through one last surge of rain, push some heavy rains up into New England, and then once it goes by, it's going to be a matter of a short amount of time to get in some of the cooler, drier air that is coming in behind it. And that is going to be our air for the weekend. It's a quick shot, Joe. It's a chilly shot of air, but it's quick. It comes in tomorrow. Uh, we bottom out Sunday morning, 30s and mid 40s, and then temperatures will bounce up a little bit back into the 60s on Sunday. I think we're going to get out of the 50s tomorrow.
Yeah, it's almost like a pendulum, if you will. The swing of the pendulum with the cold air swinging in from the west for tonight into tomorrow, and then the pendulum continues to swing up and away to the north and east, and takes the cold air with it for later in the weekend into the start of next week.
The upper air pattern, if you follow the clouds along, which suddenly my thing has decided not to do, so just a second here. There we go. Let me get the toolbox back up. And if you just kind of follow the clouds along here, you can see how we've got this trough in the eastern part of the United States. There's a ridge here in the west. The ridge is flat enough that we're getting moisture coming in toward the Pacific Northwest and spreading out through the plains. And plus, we have these shortwave troughs that are dropping down in the northern part of the jet stream. And in fact, I'm going to switch over. We'll go to the Canada view. It's amazing, Joe. The look here from Canada pretty much tells the whole story with respect to how this upper pattern here is really being driven by this trough that's in the east, and there's an upper low sitting over Hudson Bay that really isn't moving very much, but we keep getting these little arms that sort of rotate around it. And that upper trough is going in the position of that upper low, and the general mechanics that are present in Canada are going to be the key to the forecast down the road, because it's how those short waves behave when they drop southeastward that will ultimately determine what winds up happening in the long term. And the other thing I just want to point out real quick, if you look on the right, I just drew a circle. You can see that's the developing low that is near Bermuda, or actually it's east of Bermuda, and it is gotten better organized today, which is something the Hurricane Center has been indicating, and they've been raising their probabilities for development there. This is a separate system. There's a system that's going to be developing in the Caribbean, which is, I think, going to be more important to the longer term outlook here for late next week and next weekend.
It's that time of the year, and we saw about 10 years ago, a little less than 10 years ago, 2011, 2012, the snow in 2011, the Sandy in 2012. It always seems, Joe, that not all the time, but we get toward the end of October, there's always something out of the ordinary that will form, and this just might be a crazy year of 2020. This just might be one of those years this year with the potential that we have been alluding to around the 27th of this month of another tropical disturbance that may move in our direction or may move close to us.
We have snow out there in the forecast, and the weather prediction folks with their probability map for Montana and the Dakota, North Dakota in particular, and on up through Minnesota. And this is for the next 72 hours. So this takes us to Monday morning. And I've put up the probability of less than 2 inches, but there's a fair swath of up to 2 inches of snow being indicated, high probability of 2 inches of snow in western Montana, and also a 50% or higher chance across North Dakota into northern Minnesota. And then it kind of tails off a little bit as you go further east, although there's a little bubble of 40 to 50% on the Wisconsin-Michigan border there. I'm going to just change the probability over to 4, and still a fairly high probability of greater than 2 but less than 4, up to 70% or so in western Montana, and about 50 or 60% over parts of Minnesota. I'll jump up to the 8 or more just to see what's left with that. And in the mountains of Montana, you're seeing some 40% or higher probabilities in a few spots in western Montana. In the Northeast, just want to point out that 2 inches or less in northern New Hampshire and western Maine, and even a small portion of northeastern Vermont, showing a 20 to 30 to maybe 40% chance that there could be less than 2 inches of snow from this particular low that is moving northward. And when we check the radar at the moment, you can see the action in the Northeast, and from New England down to Delaware, to the Delmarva Peninsula. Also some rain going on in parts of South Florida, not tropical, not related to any kind of tropical development. And we're seeing some moisture up in the Northwest with some rains coming into Washington State, and some rain and snow beginning now into parts of Montana. So this is the time of year, Joe, where little by little the snow part of the equation gets bigger and bigger.
Well, did you take note of the fact that in portions of, not for our immediate area, but the portions of eastern Pennsylvania, I believe have, I'm not sure if they're frost advisories or freeze warnings.
They have frost advisories.
And into the interior of New York State. So, I guess if they were thinking, the Weather Service officers were thinking that they were going to have that type of condition for tomorrow night, they already would have put some kind of a watch in effect. So I guess they're
not necessarily. Every office has got its. When it comes to the frost and freeze, I can never figure it out. So, because that's one of those things that's only for the first night. And then, of course, you already had a widespread frost and some freezes in upstate New York and in central and northern New England. So they're not going to put them up again because their growing season is over.
Right.
So
right.
we'll see how far the southern extent of it tomorrow. We'll see what they do with it. But right now, there's a stalled front along the coast, a little wave being indicated there near near Nantucket, and then there's another wave that's down off the North Carolina coast. Ultimately, one wave is just going to take over here and pull all of this out to the northeast, so that we can finally get to some of the drier and cooler air that's out to our west. As we see temperatures right now across Michigan in the 40s, it's in the 30s in Wisconsin, back up into Minnesota and the Dakotas. So this is chilly air for this time of year that is coming down. And as for rainfall over the next 7 days, this is front end loaded here, so I'm not expecting too much from southern New England southward. The rainfall amounts, in addition to what's already fallen, anywhere from another tenth to maybe another half an inch from west to east, because some places in eastern Pennsylvania the rain is already pretty much done. We're seeing some precip back through the Great Lakes and down into the Ohio Valley. Northern New England, you'll probably see some showers at some point during this week with a couple of cold fronts coming through. You see the rain up in the northwest and also down in southernmost Florida and then out into the open waters of the Florida Straits and points south. And that's because of the potential for tropical cyclone development later next week or late next week.
And Brandon Doherty brings up a good point. Remember, gang, early signs of a significant winter with lots of early snow are no indicators of future months. This happened a couple of years ago. We got nothing. 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, nada. So,
Right.
yeah,
Past performance is not a guarantee of future results, but unfortunately, sometimes it's the only thing you have to to go on.
right, right. And you need something to hang your hat some years and or your snow hat, and that's the only thing that you can, unless you're into the Siberian. I know our good friend Bill Goodman has already posted on his Facebook page indications of the growing snows in Siberia.
Which have
But
been subpar, by the way, so
yeah,
far.
yeah,
And I saw a tweet from Dr. Judah Cohen, because that's his thing. And he also mentioned that it was the growth so far has been on the low end of the last 10 or 15 years. But we've also seen that the Siberian snow cover growth indicator has not really worked very well once everybody figured out that it was something to look at. So,
well,
once you
again, another way to hang your hat. You know,
in the
I
endless
think
search that for the silver bullet that's going to give you a 100% correct forecast 100% of the time, and it doesn't exist,
well,
sadly.
not in October. I think October is still kind of early in the ball game, even though the folks over at NOAA have actually moved their winter forecast from late November into mid October. Um, I still think it's not until the end of November or the beginning of December can you uh, start really looking at things and making a good idea as to what may come our way for the upcoming winter season. Sometimes even then it doesn't work, but I still think it's a little early in the ball game now to start, wondering. But of course, Joe, that we talked about this. There were websites and YouTube videos telling us what the winter was going to be like already in September and August.
Yeah, I mean, which is ridiculous. All right, let's take a look at where we're going with all of this for the weekend and next week. And of course, the upper pattern is pretty much dominated by the fact that we have higher than normal pressures up in the North Atlantic and across the polar region, which displaces colder air further south. We have this upper low in Hudson Bay. It's kind of pinned in there, and a trough that's swinging around and heading for the longitude of Hawaii, and a flat upper high sitting right off the west coast, which when it builds would build northward up the west coast. So watching the progress going into this coming week, well, through this week, because we're now at the present day, you see the arm that's going through the northeast is tonight's weather system. That lifts up, and then this upper low kind of pulls northward to the northern part of Hudson Bay, and then it's going to start dropping southward again. You'll start to see that late next week. It pulls the one tropical system that forms southeast of Bermuda pretty much straight northward to about 40 and 60. And then the second arm comes down and picks up what you see down there in the Northwest Caribbean is the upper feature that reflects the potential tropical cyclone that will pop up in the Northwest Caribbean, and it just shoots it right up the East Coast. And if you just follow the gears along, folks, you can see how that upper trough that swings through the Great Lakes and Middle Mississippi Valley just literally picks it up and shoots it right up the eastern seaboard. Now, that's, of course, we're looking now at day 11 at the end of this period that I just showed you. And if we carry it out to the long range, Joe, that trough in the east is still there going into the first days of November. In fact, it's a very cold-looking upper pattern that is, if this were to verify, you have a flow that comes straight from the Arctic regions down into the southeastern part of the United States. This is if you have this in November, this is very cold. This is very chilly for the relative the time of year. But a pattern like this in January, and you're talking about really, really cold air. However, and it's a big however, we're going to show you what this, by the way, this overall pattern, not so much the end of the forecast period, but the period that involves whatever systems that are out there in the Atlantic or in the Caribbean. Uh, this has been pretty much how the GFS has behaved now for over a week, for the most part. There's been some variation, but for the most part, this has been the general principle of the pattern in the upper air. But one of the things that suddenly appeared here on the last run, which is the late afternoon in between run, is that the trough, instead of dropping in the east, it actually drops it down into the southwest. Part of it drops down to the southwest, and the northern part is not nearly as strong. So your tropical system in the Caribbean winds up crossing Cuba, going over Florida, going into the east coast of Florida, and then turning west and moving into the Gulf of Mexico.
Yep.
I mean, look, this is a big departure from what this is a new variation. There have been some runs that have done different things, but this is a bit new. And I would just point out that it has, at least from the standpoint, as I said earlier, when you look at the ensembles from earlier today, I'll see if the new ones are in, but the earlier ensembles matched up what the operational did. And well, I mean, we have enough of the new ensemble to go with the idea that it doesn't look like it really matches very well at all with what the operational did at 18Z. This looks more like what the 12Z ensembles looked like.
I think that the operation will go right back to the old idea of moving something parallel to the eastern seaboard and toss that solution of moving it over the Florida Peninsula and then into the Gulf of Mexico out into the circular file. Not to say that between now and let's say the next 10 or 11 days, we might get an occasional hiccup and it'll pop up or show up again. But I think generally speaking, we're thinking along the lines of some possible threat
Right.
to the Atlantic seaboard in those final few days of October.
So let's just roll the new surface, and then we'll go back. I'll look at the 12Z just to give everybody a sense of how different it is. So this, of course, our weather system here pulling out and leaving us with good weather for the weekend. You see the snow that's up in the Dakotas in northern Minnesota, northern Wisconsin, with low pressure to the lakes. That's going to push a cold front toward us on Monday. That looks like it just basically weakens and falls apart before it gets here. And then there's another weak system late Tuesday that goes by that doesn't really do very much. And then yet another one late Wednesday into Thursday that doesn't do very much. So that looks like a fairly, these are weak weather fronts that are going by. Friday sees something maybe a little bit that's a little more important. And of course, now you start to see how the model at the 18Z run takes this thing from the Northwest Caribbean, moves it over the east coast of Florida, and then turns it westward, actually southwestward and then westward into the Gulf of Mexico, and then turns it south, Joe, into the Yucatan Peninsula. I mean,
Yep.
it's really a very bizarre track that it has because of the fact that it builds that sort of a skinny ridge to the north of it, and it has more of the troughing out in the west. Again, as you said, this might be one for the where you would just toss it, or may wind up tossing it. But just to go back to the other run, which we showed you what the upper air looked like with that.
But
Uh,
again, it's so much different.
yeah, this one.
It's hard to accept. You say to yourself, well, something must have some bad data, maybe corrupt data got into this particular run, and just simply it just doesn't make any sense. You're
Right.
absolutely right.
And you see it here on the earlier run because of how it structured the upper air and just took that southern system and shot it right up the east coast. I mean, it has a. I mean, this really eventually were to be what the GFS is showing here is really something that becomes a post-tropical or extratropical cyclone, albeit a very, very strong one that moves east of the Carolinas and goes into southeastern New England, and it'll behave like a winter type system behaves, where all the heavy precip will be on the northwest side, and that's what it shows. And I mean, if this were right, this breaks the drought for New England. So, I mean, you're doing it in a rather violent way with a 951 pressure or whatever that is sitting near Cape Cod. But again, this is the model theory. Uh, I can understand how it gets there. I can understand how the upper air produces a gale like this, a storm like this. But uh, we're talking we're talking. This is day 10. This is next Monday. So we're going to be sitting here at this time next week trying to put this puzzle together. But right now, it's you really can't really say too much more. The only other thing I would say, Joe, is that as far as early snow is concerned out of something like this, uh, I think it's a stretch. You got to have the atmosphere perfect for those types of situations. What I will say is, if you wind up with something really this deep that goes by, it'll be a pattern adjuster, let's call it, and it certainly will get cold behind it. Now, there might be some other system upstream for the later in the forecast period. If you remember with Hurricane Sandy, it was about, was it 8 or 9 days later that we actually got significant heavy wet snowstorm from an upper
Right.
low that came behind it. You know,
It was the day of election day.
you're right. Sandy pretty much um, aligned everything in such a way in the upper atmosphere that we had this cold upper air system that came by, and everything just kind of, it kind of worked out almost perfectly when it happened. That's the only way you're going to do it this time of year. So I think what you'd have to look at is that you would see something come up the coast if this were correct, and then you'll have to wait to see if there's another system behind it by 3 or 4 days that would be something that might be, which the GFS on a couple of runs ago sort of showed that idea. I'm throwing
Didn't
it out
Sandy,
there, but I honestly I have no idea how this is going to work out. How's this going to happen?
and didn't Sandy give rise to a blizzard or something close to that in parts of West Virginia and
Oh yeah,
Western
no,
Virginia?
yes, there were some big snows in the mountains of West Virginia when Sandy became post-tropical.
Yeah.
But we're speculating here on something that hasn't even formed yet. So I really don't feel too comfortable doing it because we don't know. I mean, you look at this with the upper feature; it's showing snow in parts of central Kentucky and central Tennessee, and into West Virginia and western North Carolina. Again, that's because of where the other cold upper feature is. But you got to have something there first. And as I said, I kind of see how it can happen, but I wouldn't necessarily bet the bank on it at the moment. So how about the Weather Service winter forecast?
Well, we talked about that yesterday, didn't we? Although
I
we,
know, but we tried that yesterday. That's when we lost the signal. I wonder if there was a coincidence there. Hmm. But for those of you who didn't see NOAA's weather service forecast, it's pretty much based on the ongoing La Nina, which would favor warmer temperatures to the south and cooler temperatures to the north. And we're kind of on the edge of this with the above normal, with below normal up in the northern plains and in the northwest, and near normal everywhere else. If again, it's a broad forecast for 90 days, so who knows? And precip is near normal. uh, the brown area is actually drier than normal. It's odd, Joe. It's got the whole southern half of the United States drier than normal, and the northern half, where the areas where it's cooler than normal, is also where it has it wetter than normal.
I'd like to, yeah, there's some parts of these two maps where the equal chances area, the white area, overlap both in terms of temperature and precipitation. So if you live, I think you live in parts of, let's say, Nebraska or Iowa or northern Missouri or whatever, it's equal chances for both. So what's the sense of even looking
Right.
at this?
And equal chances, by the way, when we say, see, I wish they would just kind of go normal, above normal, below normal. But equal chances means that there's a 50-50 chance that it could be either above or below. All
Right.
right. And then when you get into those darker greens, you're talking about a 30% probability of a greater than 50% chance of it being. You follow me? I mean, this is just, it's
Yeah.
silly. It, the, 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 um, the wonky folks and the geeky folks loved it. Would love a map like this because it's 30% of the 50%, and it's like let's start taking the first and second and third derivatives, and then trying to explain that to the public. I tried to explain this a couple of times, and I only found myself just collapsing from embarrassment. So I basically, to me, it's like just say above normal or below normal because people understand that. People don't understand a map like this.
I don't understand it sometimes. But and the other thing is, you could have, a probability of above normal temperatures. You can get above normal temperatures all through the course of the winter season, and then you get that one rogue setup where it's cold over your area of the country, and you get a storm coming along, and boom, you end up with a massive snowstorm, and then people their memory becomes colored. They don't think of all those days and weeks of above normal temperatures. They only think of the snowstorm and say, "Oh, what a horrible winter we had."
Yep.
It's not. And of course, here in New York, what did we had that one winter a few years ago where we had near record high temperatures one day, and the very next day we were into a blizzard.
Right. Well, the winter of 1718, we had
Yeah,
two big snowstorms that year, I believe, if I remember correctly. One at the beginning of January, and the one in February. And yeah, we were surrounded by warm air much of the time in between those systems. So
right.
if you don't like cold weather but you do like snow, that was a winter for you because you wasn't snowing, it really wasn't all that cold.
Correct.
And when it was,
And
and as you said, yeah, we had that record high, those temperatures in the 70s in February, some all-time record highs that were set in some places, and then the next day it was 19 with S plus and thunder.
we don't seem to get the snowstorms of old, the ones that you and I kind of grew up with, where you have a big snow, and then immediately in the wake of the storm, you get the cold, cold winds and
Well, that
the
was 13, 14, and 14, 15 was like that.
yeah, I guess you could say that. I'm
No,
like,
it was 13, 14, and 14, 15, Joe. Those two winters, I don't think there was a single snow event in those two winters that where it snowed with temperatures above 25. And in fact, the vast majority of the snowfalls that winter fell with temperatures in the teens, and even in some cases down in the low teens and single digits.
which of course
That was
which
a
of course means
remarkable. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, which of course means that you don't use the standard 10-to-1 ratio. Probably we had ratios of 15 and even 20-to-1, and the snows were not that heavy, wet,
Right.
gloppy snow, but that
Those were
low density, puffy, powdery type of snow. That
those were 60, 70-inch snow years out here for me.
Yeah,
So I remember those two winters were actually quite amazing from the Long Island angle, anyhow. But again, what stood out to me about those two particular winters was that for those two winters, if you go back, every snow event we had temperatures well below freezing and sometimes well below 20. It was quite cool to see and experience.
as
So,
opposed to what we've had over the last few years, where if you had a big snow, you really didn't have too much to worry about because you just knew that within a day or two it was going to warm up, and nature was going to help you out in getting rid of that snow.
correct. So we're back on full screen. I just want to, by the way, I don't know who it was when I lost the internet. We lost the internet signal yesterday. Somebody hit super chat. So whoever you are that hit super chat yesterday, thank you very much. Joe and I appreciate it. And we have two super chat hits tonight from James H or James Harris, as I believe that's who it is, and also from Brandon Doherty. And thank you both um, for hitting super chat. We both really appreciate it greatly. So
If
let me.
people are wondering what's going on in this room here with the lighting all of a sudden, Madame Rayo came down. I
Oh,
guess
she's
she's
well, of course, she's the lighting director too.
right. So she's
Naturally.
playing around with the lights here, and I don't know. It looks good. I'm looking at this right now, and it doesn't look all that bad to me, or whatever. So
Well, lighting is, after all, very important, especially at our age.
yes, yes, indeed.
Oh,
Did we
good
take? Did,
Lord.
did we make mention of who hit super chats
I
tonight? Or
just did.
oh, Okay,
You're too busy paying attention to the lighting director.
correct, correct.
All right. We don't have Briller Jeopardy tonight because Scott's out working, so the chairman is out. But Joe and I will be back on Sunday at 11 o'clock Eastern Time for our regular Sunday morning Joe and Joe weather show. Frank Riggio reminding us that he had 11 inches a few days after Sandy in central New Jersey. Yeah, I mean, under the right circumstances aloft, it would. It certainly is possible, but it's one of those things when it snows this time of year. You really, it's a waste of energy to look at it now. You can envision how the models how the models are going to show it, and you could also you kind of know the ways you need to see it happen in terms of the surface. But 7-day speculations ahead of time so far in the middle, in basically the middle of autumn, it's not going to get you anywhere. So we'll just have to wait and see where the models take us going forward. I think the tropical development is something that's probably the most important out of all of this, and we'll just see how it evolves when
You know,
we get into next week.
the thing is that people have brought this up too, that it's been such an active tropical storm season, lots of tropical cyclones, equivalent to even possibly soon exceeding what we had in 2005. So people are saying, well, what did we get in terms of snow in 2005, 2006? And it turns out that that particular winter, Joe, was by the normal standards of things, a relatively mild winter. And had we not had one single snowstorm in mid February, I think it was on the 12th of February of that year, one storm dropped like 26 inches at Central Park.
Mm-hmm.
And if it wasn't for that one, and it turned out that that was one of the 4 consecutive years where Central Park had 40 plus inches of snow. And if it weren't for that one storm in 2006, winter of 2006, we would have had only like 13 inches of snow at Central Park. And overall, it was a mild winter. And so it really wouldn't have been all that bad.
Well,
But
I
if it,
mean, Joe, big storms here on average, it only occur once every 3 years. It's just that in the last 20 years, we've gotten spoiled with multiple snowstorms happening in a single year. In some cases, three big storms in one year. But the winter of 2012, 2013, which was probably, I would say, probably close to average as far as temperatures are concerned over the course of the winter. Well, if it wasn't for the snow, I had 50. If I remember correctly, I had 51 inches for the winter that year, but 30 of those inches came from the Snowmageddon storm. So if it
right.
wasn't for that, I've only gotten 20 or 21. But that's almost the big storms drive the averages upward.
Right.
So if you don't get those, like you saw in the 1970 to 2000 time frame in New York, you got very few of those storms in that time frame. That's what kept the averages down. As opposed to, because if you, let's just say in that 30 year, uh, if you if it's a normal 30-year period and you get a major snowstorm of a foot or more once every 3 years, you should have 10 snowstorms in that 30-year cycle. Okay,
Right.
but we only had five, so you're missing 150 inches of snow from the total. So if you divide that by 30, that's 5 inches added to the normal as it otherwise would have been. So, yeah, those big storms really make up a lot of the snowfall totals for the most part. In
And what
most
was that one
winters,
year we didn't have a single flake until like the first
first
day of
day of
spring?
spring. I think that was 90, was it 97, 98, or 98, 99? One of those two.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a wacko. We
Yeah,
were working.
I think we had a 5 inch snowfall in a very, very small area, and New York City happened to be in that, like the day after the first day of spring, and
Yeah,
that
that was kind of like
that basically prevented the shutout.
well, not just the shutout. That would have been like a perfect game. That's kind of like the Tom Seaver, almost the imperfect game Seaver threw 8 and 1/3 innings of no runs, no hits, nothing, and then Jimmy Qualls comes along and gets a base hit
Yeah,
with one out in the ninth inning. That's kind of like that winter. I mean, like
yeah,
we had nothing in terms of snowfall, and it honestly looked for a while like we were going to have the very first and possibly only 0.0 inch snow winter, and then we, as you mentioned, first day of spring, 5 or 6 inches of snow, and so much for that.
correct, exactly. All right, so we're going to wrap it up here, folks. It's a Friday night, and everybody wants to try and do something, I guess. But Joe and I will be back on Sunday morning at 11 o'clock Eastern Time for our usual Sunday morning Joe and Joe Weather Show. And I will remind my Patreon subscribers that Monday, after the Joe and Joe Weather Show is over at 9 o'clock Eastern Time, um, we're going to have a Zoom video. So everybody that's a member of my Patreon platform will be invited to it, and you can come in and participate in the conversation. We'll be able to talk about whatever it is you want to talk about, weather-wise or otherwise, and just have some fun. And we're going to do that every week. So again, that's for Patreon members. If you're interested in joining the Patreon, my weather platform there, it's patreon.com/meteorologist Joe Chaffee. It's a subscription site, but if you take a year subscription, you get 15% off or 2 months free. And that's all there is to it. All
Yes.
right. All right, Mr. Ray. We'll see you on